Okay, let's say you want to learn how to make apps for the iPhone and you want to just kind of know globally how that whole process works. This is not going to get into the details of that, of how to make apps for the iPhone, but just kind of like a global overview, how much it might cost you, how long it might take, and what software you might need or what hardware you might need. Okay, the cost for being a developer. Let's start out with that. First of all, I have another question is, do you have a Mac computer? Because you pretty much need a Mac computer to create apps for the iPhone. So if you have a Mac computer, then the cost for being a developer is like $300 a year. For me, that's what I pay. It might be more for some folks, but here's my breakdown. Apple has a developer fee that's like $107 a year. You need a website pretty much to host your, you need a place for people to contact you for support if they have a problem with your app. You also need a place to host your user agreements, your privacy policy, your things like that. And then I also use GitHub for version control and backup. So GitHub is kind of like a way to upload your coding files and save them in the cloud. So that way if something happens to your computer, it's safe over there. Also, it's a way to collaborate with other programmers. Okay, so that's why it costs $300 a year, and because I already have a Mac computer. So if you don't have a Mac computer, then you have to buy a Mac also. The first thing, the fun part is to come up with your idea for an app. So you come up with an idea for an app, great. What does your app do? Does it exist? Who's your competition? Why is your app different than the competition? Who's the target audience? You draw it out, ask some people if it's a good idea or not. That's the fun part, right? Prototype it, proof of concept. Okay, now let's also say you've got that done and now it's go time. You've got your Mac computer, you're sitting down like, how do I build the app? Okay, so go over here to the App Store, the Mac App Store on your Mac computer, and xcode, look for Xcode. This is the software you use to make apps. So click the Get button here. Mine says Update because I've already gotten it. And to get the Xcode, you'll probably need an Apple ID. It's really hard to actually have an Apple computer without having an Apple ID in the first place. So get your Apple ID and download Xcode. Let's take a look inside of Xcode here. So you'll create a new project inside of Xcode. This is kind of what an app would look like. It's not complete. This one's pretty much starting from scratch. Nothing's going on here. But you would have a bunch more Swift files probably and more views, and this would be all fleshed out. This is the part that's going to take a long time, by the way. And if you don't know coding, you don't know programming, there's a little bit of a learning curve here for sure. I would say estimate 3 months if you know how to program to create a simple app. So about 3 months to make it easy app, maybe 6 months or more if you have no idea of how to program. Your first app idea, try to come up with something simple, like not too complicated. So all these files over here add up to build your app. There are simulators, so you want to test your app on an iPhone 12 Pro, no problem. iPhone 8, you want to test it on an iPad, no problem. You just run the simulator and it'll simulate your app on this computer. You can also hook your computer up with the lightning cable and simulate your app if it's provisioned correctly on your own device. So you can see the app in action on your own device. If you have a developer account, there's a lot of devices you can hook up. But I think with a free account, there's a limited number of devices you can provision for testing. So let's say that you've built your project here, you've tested it, you've run it by some folks. Now you want to submit it to Apple. You go up here to Product, Archive. So you're going to archive this product, and that's pretty much going to zip it up, and then there'll be a little distribute button there. You click on the distribute button, and here's the distribute button, and it uploads it to your developer account. Now, how does it know where to upload it to? Well, that's because you've set your bundle identifier over here, which is kind of like a unique identifier that identifies your app. And when you go to create a new app in the App Store Connect account, click this plus sign, it'll ask you for that bundle identifier. So here are some apps that I've created, and when you click that distribute button, then it'll upload, process, and then it'll be selectable down here in the build. So that is how you connect your code that you've created with your App Store Connect app. You'll also need a bunch of screenshots from your app. You'll need an app icon. There's all kinds of things you need to actually before you submit your app to the App Store. So you prepare your app for submission. You're going to put in a bunch of keywords to search for your app. You put some promotional text in, some description, support URL, all this stuff. You fill all this information. You've got your build selected here. So you've got your build selected. And then you click to submit for review for Apple. So once you click submit for review, it is queued up in a line, and it could take 24 hours. It could take 2 weeks. It could take 30 days for Apple to review your app. Typically, it usually takes like 2 or 3 days for Apple to review an app these days. That changes depending on how busy they are. But what Apple's going to do is they're going to take a look at your app. They're going to click around on it. And they're going to run it through some algorithms to make sure it's not like draining the battery. It doesn't have any viruses. It's not like malicious. It's not wrecking the CPU on the phone. But they're not going to look at your code. They're not going to open up your xcode project and pour through your code and check how everything is. So don't worry if your code is a mess. What they are going to do is they're going to look at the buttons and the functionality. And so Apple's going to do one of three things. They're either going to reject your app outright because it's either a bad idea, not allowed in the App Store, or there's a million other flashlight apps in the App Store. That doesn't really usually happen. Or Apple's going to reject it and ask you to change something, or Apple will approve it. And typically they'll reject it and ask you to change something like maybe 30% of the time, 30-40% of the time that happens. So it's quite frequent that it happens that Apple rejects your app for some reason or another. Usually it's like this button is too small, or we'd like you to add a button that does this or that. Like just the core functionality of it needs to be in line. And that's it, really. When Apple approves your app in the App Store, it's ready to go. At that point, you've already selected how much it's going to cost, how much people are going to pay, and then Apple will pay you on their payment schedule. Apple's payment schedule is kind of weird. I wanted to say it was quarterly, but I think it's not. I think it might be like monthly with like exceptions, or so Apple will pay you occasionally, and check their payment schedule for that. And that's it, kind of. Apple will, pay you from time to time, and you'll make money on your app, and you'll live happily ever after. I hope you liked this video. If you did, like and subscribe. I'm sure I'm, skimming over a bunch of things, and I missed a bunch of stuff. So ask me questions in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer those for you.